and welcome to Books Boba, a podcast about books written by Asian and Asian American authors. We're also a book club. I'm Marvin Yue, joined by Rira Yu and Alice Van Chang.
Hello.
How's it going? And this is our, mid-month episode. We decided, 1 month was way too long in between to listen to our voices. So we wanted to, and there's so much. So if you've been following the Books Boba Facebook page and Twitter, you've seen that Rira has been following very closely the goings-on of the literary world, especially in terms of Asian American authors. And I didn't realize that there was that much news going on.
I mean, there were slow months, obviously. Like, I kind of wish we did this mid-month episode last month because so many books by Asian American authors came out. Like Marie Lu's, the final book of the Young Elite series, like Midnight Star. Oh my God. So many books came out last month, but this month it's a little bit slower. But we still have some book news.
And we decided to bring Alice on to give her hot takes as well.
Yay!
I will also be providing hot takes since I'm not 100% keyed into what's been happening. But Rira's been, she has a lot to say.
A lot to say.
So we decided to, in between our monthly book reviews or book club episodes, to bring you a review on what's been going on in the world of Asian American literature. And, in lieu of that, also, it'll give us a chance to bring on maybe authors to talk to or people in the biz that might be cool to listen to. So,
talk about our feelings on just all the rage.
Yeah, it's been a weird couple of just a weird week, actually.
It's been a weird year.
It's been a weird
waiting for 2016 to end. I just need it to end.
Yeah, I'm not an angry person, but lately I've felt very full of rage, which is unusual
2016
for me.
Just quit it.
Yeah.
Stop. Anyways, I guess we'll just start off with Rira. What's been up in the world of Asian American literature?
Okay, so I guess we'll start with books that are coming out this month or have already came out earlier this month. So the first book on our list is Timekeeper by Tara Sim, and the publisher is Sky Pony Press. The book came out in November 8th, and it's about it's set in an alternate Victorian world where clock towers can control the flow of time. And it follows Danny, a 17-year-old mechanic who is assigned to fix a broken clock in a small town. And he falls in love with his mysterious apprentice, who turns out to be a clock spirit.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. Yeah. I just like the aesthetic.
Yeah. Steampunk just looks cool.
Yeah.
The second book on our list is The Elephants in My Backyard, a memoir. And it's by Rajiv Surendra, who is, if you are a fan of Mean Girls, he's that guy who raps in The Mathlete.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's a memoir, and it's published by Regan Arts. And it's just a memoir that chronicles his pursuit to be cast in the lead role of The Life of Pi. Because apparently Rajiv went to India to do some research and some soul searching. So,
cool.
Yeah, it sounds pretty interesting.
Indian Tamil Canadian, right?
Yeah. Tamil Canadian.
It's a good mix.
And then we have Memoirs of a Polar Bear. Not an actual memoir. The novel follows 3 generations of polar bears who are famous as both circus performers and writers in East Germany. And it's written by Yoko Tawada and translated by Susan Bernofsky. And the publisher is New Directions, and it came out November 8th, so it is available.
Is this nonfiction or is it...
It's
Polar bears?
Definitely fiction with polar bears as characters.
So there's not actually 3 generations of polar bear that were circus performers?
And writers.
Crushing my dreams right now?
I want to read it because it just seems so whimsical and
Yeah.
weird, and I just love weird books because they just go in really, really unexpected
Yeah.
directions. So.
Still sounds interesting. I was just wondering if it was for reals or not.
Next, we have Fish in Exile, and that's by, oh, shoot. Okay, I'm sorry if I butcher this. Vicky Now? Now?
No one here is Vietnamese.
I am so sorry if I mispronounce your name. But it's by Coffee House Press, and the novel follows a married couple, Ethos and Catholic, who lose their twin children in a terrible accident at the seashore and must learn to cope with their grief.
Ethos and Catholic.
Oh, no.
Those are like
Interesting.
Yeah.
From what I've heard about it, it's definitely like there's definitely a lot of like poetry in it because the author is like known for her poetry. And I think this is her debut novel, so
Oh, that's cool.
it's interesting. And last but not least, we have Invisible Planets, an anthology of contemporary Chinese science fiction in translation. And it's an anthology of Chinese sci-fi stories written by Chinese sci-fi authors. And the editor is Ken Liu, and you probably have heard his name from the Dandelion Dynasty series. I think his second book in that series just came out earlier this year. So that is published by Tor Books, and it came out earlier this month. So that is also available at your bookstore.
It's awesome. Quite a varied list.
Yeah.
You got
Good mix.
polar bear fantasy and steampunk and Chinese science fiction, which is something that I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah, I'm like really
Yeah.
interested in it because I because you know how in like at least in Japan, sci-fi is like big robots and
Yeah.
like mecha, and I'm like, oh, what's Chinese sci-fi like?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's on the list, but there's the three body problem, which is one of the first like big.
Oh yeah, that's definitely
like Chinese
on our list.
sci-fi
Yeah.
stories that's being made into a movie, and it's really interesting. I was listening to someone else describe it as, a lot of sci-fi that we see in the world is very Western focused.
Right.
It's like Western sci-fi. So what sci-fi is in other cultures is always super interesting. Like you said, Japanese, big robots, or a lot. I think there's a lot of cosmic horror in Japanese sci-fi.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting what the Chinese like. What's the right word? Canon is perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perspective, I guess.
Yeah. Shall I move to book deals?
Yeah. Who's getting paid? Let's check it out.
Who's getting paid? Who got their books picked up? So Roshani Chowsky, the author of The Star-Touched Queen, she has her new trilogy, The Gilded Wolves, picked up by St. Martin's Press and Wednesday Books. And it's set in Paris, and the series follows a charismatic but cursed heir of a massive fortune as he plots to steal one of three ancient and powerful artifacts of fate. He and his crew will navigate the elite gatherings of secret occult societies, traveling through Paris's catacombs, where they must confront their worst secrets, as well as the destiny they never imagined. Publication is set for fall 2018.
It's so far.
That
but-
sounds
It's so
so
far.
I'm
YA
so
fiction
excited.
trilogy.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Because
You're a fan of her, right?
her writing is beautiful. It's like
It's very lush.
it's lush and gorgeous, and
Her covers are also very beautiful.
Yeah.
Although that's like not really in the author's control.
right. Yeah, but in her case,
She has good taste, right? So do the authors get like final say on the covers, or is that the publisher?
No.
they can sometimes like have input, like like, oh, I would like this direction, or like,
Yeah.
my book is inspired by these sorts of images, but they ultimately don't have control.
That's really cool.
Next, we have, let's see, Viking has acquired world rights to Look, What Do You See? The first children's book by MacArthur Award winner Xu Bing, who was the former VP of China's Central Academy of Fine Arts. And this is an art puzzle book of American and Chinese songs. And it's illustrated by Becca Stadlander. Yeah, Becca Stadlander. And publication is scheduled for fall 2017.
So it's like a book of ciphers, or
maybe like it's hard to say because it is a picture book.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of his art is like very like calligraphy based, so I would assume that the book has a lot of that in store for it.
That's cool. It's kind of like the whole last Mimsy thing, right, where they're trying to train kids to like think abstractly. I think that's cool. Or it's, a way to indoctrinate our kids.
And last but not least, we have Jade Feng Lee, who sold her debut middle grade graphic novel to Scholastic? Or is it Scholastic? I've always called it like Scholastic.
Scholastic. Yeah, that's
Scholastic.
true. I never thought about that for now.
I feel so dumb right now.
They're the monthly book club people, right?
Yeah.
Where you ordered book orders from school.
So the graphic novel follows a second generation Chinese American middle schooler who struggles to reconcile her Chinese heritage with her quote unquote American expectations of her peers. Publication is tentatively slated for 2019. So that's not coming out for a while, but it's nice to have like younger graphic novels for younger readers.
That's true. I was thinking, my first reaction to that was like, oh, not another one of these. But for the middle grade range, I think that makes sense. Like, if not for Asian Americans to read, for like their non-Asian classmates to kind of get a sense of the alienation.
And I feel like that age was probably the age when I was most like, no, I'm American, So yeah, like I think that's good to have for.
Have either of you read American Born Chinese, the graphic novel by Yoon-Ji?
Yes.
But like as an adult.
An adult,
I read
right?
it in college.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like it's for a younger audience.
Right.
It seems like for people who are in college or a
or
little bit more
like
mature.
older teens maybe, but yeah.
I don't know. Like I remember I read a lot of like Asian children books growing up. Like they were written in English and they were like written by like Korean or Korean American authors because I went to Korean school and like the teachers were like, read this. This will teach you about history. And
I had like a book of fables that was
that
translated,
counts, yeah.
like Chinese fables. I don't know.
But like those stories were mainly like set in Korea or like set in Japan.
Right.
And it's like, oh, it's never really about like people like me growing up in America. So
Right, they're
That's
not like
true.
Asian American.
yeah, they're not Asian American. They're just Asian.
Yeah.
I remember always being excited when there's that one Asian kid in like the Magic School Bus.
Right.
Oh my God. You're right.
There's like that one. I was always interested in what that one kid was doing.
Yeah.
Or it's like how if you read Babysitter Club, which I didn't really, but there was that one Asian girl that
Yeah.
Yeah,
Claudia, who is not good at school, eats junk food all the time.
wants to be like fashionista.
Yeah, and she's like super artsy, and I'm like, you're my hero.
That's totally the Alice. Like, I'm American. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess other book news. Okay, well,
Book news. We should have theme songs for each of these
We
segments. I feel like someone should make us jingles.
so you musicians out there who are listening to this, help us out.
yeah, we need new release music, new book deal music, and news.
Book news. Okay, well, this isn't really Asian American related or really Asian related, but I'm a really big fan of Emma Watson. She's my girl crush, and I really did want to like talk about this because
This will be like our Emma Stone like segment where you can talk about one non-Asian.
one
person.
non-Asian. Okay, like I'm allowed one. Okay, so she was a book fairy this past week. And she hid books in the London and New York subway as part of the Books on the Underground, which is a London-based group that puts 150 books in the underground and in the subway systems every week for commuters to enjoy. And she left copies of Maya Angelou's Mom and Me and Mom. And I'm like, that's so cool because I would have loved to just find free books lying around the subway when I was in New York.
Yeah.
Would you pick them up though?
Yes, free books.
What if
Do you know
someone
how
left them?
expensive
Then that would be
books are?
stealing.
Well, there should be a note saying like, "Hey."
I would guess that there's
This book is for
a
you.
note.
Love, Emma Watson. If Emma Watson left me a book, I would probably.
I'm pretty sure
have
she
it.
signed it. I mean,
That's cool though. Good on you, Emma
she's
Watson.
pretty much Hermione in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Did any of you saw the Beauty and the Beast trailer?
I did. I'm pretty excited.
I have mixed feelings about it. And I feel so torn. I'm like, oh, you're so beautiful, but I don't know if I'll like this movie. And I feel bad because it's a movie about like...
Stockholm Syndrome?
Well, no, yeah, obviously. But like the main character is like a book lover. And I'm just
Right.
like, I should identify with you, but I don't.
Oh no.
Anyway.
It looks
that-
alright. It looks Disney, so...
Yeah.
I didn't think... I always thought they would go more like closer to the actual,
The actual
fairy tale. But it looks like they're just remaking the Disney movie.
Yeah, so that's why I'm kind of like, well, I like the animated movie, so if they hew pretty close to that, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Another piece of book news, Madeline Thien was named the winner of 2016 Scotiabank Giller Prize for her novel Do Not Say We Have Nothing. And she's Canadian, so
Congrats.
yeah, congrats. It's like very rare to see Asian American or just authors of Asian descent win awards. Sometimes, like that's just how I feel sometimes because
I feel like it's going to be more and more common though now that there are more authors in the world too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we also got a Pulitzer this year. We, as in the Asian American community. But I think there's a whole generation coming of age that are writers, much more than like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are more and more opportunities in the future.
I mean, like, I feel like I see more, like, white authors winning awards for writing books about people of color than, like,
True.
people of color winning awards, like,
That's
writing
true.
about people of color. Like, Memoirs of a Geisha, that won an award, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, why did that win? It's so inaccurate.
That was just like 20 years ago. Like back then, all we had was like Amy Tan and Amy Tan.
Which brings up to the continent. Oh, the continent.
So this has been blowing up literary Twitter for the last like couple of weeks, right? Even before the election.
Yeah, it was like right before the election.
Yeah.
Well, Alice, do you want to like take?
Please fill us in. What happened?
Because I found out about this incident through you. Because I was just like, "What is the continent?" by Kira Drake. Like, why is everybody tweeting about this? It's all over my Twitter.
Yeah. So basically, a big discussion if you follow like young adult or kidlit Twitter or internet goings ons is obviously diversity issues and specifically own voices, which is just a call for giving more space to people to write about their own experiences rather than having like someone outside the experience writing the experience. So anyways, the big thing with The Continent is that it's an upcoming YA book that was slated to be released like early 2017. So review copies have been going out to bloggers and, book review websites and such. And from there, it became, I guess, obvious that there were some major issues with it in terms of how... I mean, it's a fantasy, but in the fantasy, some of the characters in this world bear like a striking resemblance to real life cultures and people, and not in a flattering way.
Yeah.
So that's the controversy, is that people realize like, hey, these are like really bad stereotypes in a book that is aimed at younger readers, and shouldn't someone speak up about it?
Yeah, like when I found out about The Continent, I went to Goodreads just to like read the summary for it, and just at first glance, you wouldn't be able to tell that like people had issues with it.
Yeah, it sounds like it honestly sounds pretty interesting. It's like a
Well, I have it up
Fantasy
right.
adventure.
Yeah,
type
like
thing,
very
right? Yeah.
high concept, like if you just read it, you're like, oh, like very intriguing right off the bat.
So like I have the Goodreads page open right now, and I'm just gonna read like the first like 2 sentences of it. For her 16th birthday, Vela's son receives the most coveted gift in all the Spire, a trip to the continent. It seems an unlikely destination for a holiday, a cold, desolate land where 2, quote-unquote, uncivilized nations remain perpetually at war. Most citizens tour the continent to see the spectacle and violence of battle. And yeah, like I guess like the story kind of kicks off when she's stranded on the continent.
So is this like Jurassic Park, but like Civil War reenactment Jurassic Park? Like,
yeah, a little bit.
Come to the park and watch these people fight.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of reminds me of like, I mean, which is also not good, but could be good if she was like examining this, but like the like colonial like view of the empire, you know, like you know, back then, like when the British Empire was a thing and people would like go to Africa to like, you know, like to tour the continent or whatever. So
come see the like savages, but with the comfort of being amongst your own people.
Yeah. So, so I was like, oh, you know, like from the summary alone, I was like, okay, well, that could be problematic, but it also seems like the book is going to address this like colonial point of view. But the problem is like, when these review copies went out, obviously people are actually reading the book, and like glaring issues came out because the 2 so-called uncivilized or savage nations who are at war on the continent bear like really striking resemblance to non-white cultures.
I guess we can get into that a little bit more. So one of these races that's featured in the continent is the Topai or Topi. Shall we pick a pronunciation? Topai? Okay. So Topai, like the book has gotten criticism for it because there's like resemblances to like Native American culture, and not in a very good way, because they're seen as
well, why don't you read the passage?
Oh my god, but it's so long. But they're described to have reddish brown skin, painted faces, faces with broad, hard angles, and they're kind of introduced by like them by the Topai clan like attempting to rape the main character, and they like don't speak her language, and they seem kind of like barbaric. That's kind of how they're portrayed in the book. And I don't know. It's just like
already problematic.
Yeah, it's kind of like all the worst stereotypes there are about Native Americans, like written as a fantasy cultures. So people were like, I don't know, it just sounds really bad.
And her in like Kira Drake's in her apology, one of the reasons that she put out was that the Topai were inspired by the Uruk-hai in Lord of the Rings. She said, Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite books, and the savage, brutal nature of the Uruk-hai breaks my heart every time I read it, which is at least once per year. The Topai are savage people. They are in no way inspired or meant to represent Native Americans. And then she says, like many, I am a person of mixed nationality, race, and then she lists Native American as one of the races that she has in her blood, and that she takes great interest and pride in her ancestry.
All right, let's be fair,
let's like throw some
Tolkien. That whole the Uruk-hai were pretty much stand-ins for like
non-white nations.
Yeah, I mean the whole
like,
fantasy tropes of other races. It's just like euphemisms for racism, right?
Right.
I love Lord of the Rings. Like anybody who knows me knows that like I do a marathon of the movies at least like once every year. I have the extended edition. I own the books. I've reread them like so many times that I had to buy like multiple copies because they got torn apart. And the thing is, like, Uruk-hai, they're not human. Like, they're not represented as, like, a human race. They don't have lines in the book. And also, there are like racist stereotypes underneath there. Like they're described to have black skin, and they're also described to have slanted eyes. So yes, there is some like Asian stereotypes thrown in there, and it's not okay. But the thing is, like, it's so far removed from like Asian culture and Black culture. It's like completely its own thing, although it has like roots in like negative stereotypes.
Like, I think it merits talking about, as in like what was his intention in like creating these races and stuff. But it's not like this is literally a Native American like stand-in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and I guess like part of the conversation too, especially after the apology came out, is just that, you know, I don't think anyone thinks she intended to write something like offensive and harmful, but it's that like there's this blindness there that can come out, and you don't realize, like, you think that you're completely making something up or removing something so far away from what it may or may not be inspired by that it's not recognizable to the real world. But, you know, if you're not, like, it doesn't seem like she's even aware necessarily that the urukai are also problematic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if you don't recognize that there are like racist roots in those parts of Lord of the Rings, then, you know, of course you probably didn't realize that like your description of the Topai are basically, you know, the worst stereotypes that have ever come out about.
And this has been
Native
a problem
Americans.
in just like the fantasy genre overall over like past decades, because so much fantasy is inspired by Tolkien, and that's why a lot of fantasy based shows and movies, there's only white people, and you're like, what the hell? Like, why are there no like other people of color?
Everything's very like medieval European based.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that way because it's fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, have a little bit more imagination. But
So what's the other?
the other is the I don't know how to pronounce this. Avenai.
Very fantasy name. There's like an apostrophe and everything.
That is the only thing. The name of the race is the only thing that's like not Japanese about about
Right.
Oh,
this
these
race.
are the Asians.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're described to have singularly dark hair, beautiful bronze skin, almond-shaped eyes, and when our heroine of this book is like being held captive against the Topai, she gets rescued by pretty much a Japanese ninja. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's a ninja, and takes her to the village, and there's a whole bunch of people with Japanese names, like literal Japanese names, like Yuki. Like, that is a Japanese name, not a made up name. That's not its own thing.
Yeah, and the village, it sounds like it's populated by a lot of like Japanese fantasy / like anime type characters. You know, there's like a feisty swordswoman, and like the love interest who rescues the heroine. He has like a little brother who has a giant dog, and there's like a healer who like, I don't know, doesn't speak or something, but is, you know, very kindly. So there's like a lot of
got rescued in like Naruto world or something.
Kind of. That's what it sounds like. So that's why, I mean, so you can see why the continent kind of blew up literary YA Twitter, because there are a lot of issues with it. And again, I don't think anyone thinks she did this, like, you know, the author intentionally went out to like write stereotypes or hurt people or whatever, but it's just indicative of like a kind of.
So from what I understood
blindness.
from what Rira showed me about the Twitter, like,
Justina
blowback.
Ireland did a live tweet of her reactions to the book, and you know, it's a little bit sad, but at the same time, it's pretty funny. So
yeah, so a lot of the dialogue has been whether or not this is racist because it is fantasy, and also shades of the whole like PC backlash, right? Like, are people being too sensitive about this and all that? I did agree with Rira that it was a little like it's just like, there's a lot of like Schadenfreude here, which is just watching someone's ignorance get called out. At the same time, for me, I don't know. I kind of felt like I can't believe this got past like the publisher.
Right. I think that's like what a lot of people are seeing.
Yeah.
But, a lot of other people like Justina Ireland who have, have been watching this issue, they're just like, you shouldn't be surprised. Like, look at how many other books with like similarly problematic things have gotten past people.
Right.
And that's why it's like necessary to point out the issues because they keep getting passed along. So
Yeah. I wonder if, I mean, this is making excuses. I wonder if this is more like a post-apocalyptic, like, maybe they are Japanese and Indians and they got thrown into this, like, Hunger Games world to, I don't know. I'm giving the author too much credit at this point. But
I'm also, like, I'm a little bit disturbed at the fact that, like, okay, so the Spire, the continent, like, it's just filled with people of color fighting each other. I mean, there's also a race of black people in the continent, and they're just like, no, we will not get involved. And they're like playing like kind of like the mystical black man. They're pretty much playing like Morgan Freeman,
Right.
Just like was like, we will not get involved until like we are called to action. And but I think it's like a little bit disturbing that like the people who are spectating all of the violence and all of the like all of this quote unquote savagery are white people. They're literally watching people of color hack at each other for entertainment, for vacation.
Right. And this is like, an ongoing trope, not just in fantasy, but oftentimes in fantasy where it's like the white people are like, the enlightened race, or they're the saviors. And it's always like, people of color who are helpers, or they're the ones killing each other, or they're the bad guys, you know?
And it's always like the trope of like white savior in like thrown into like a community of people of color, and then they're like, oh, like I can fix this. Like it's pretty much last samurai like in a fantasy world.
Right.
Yeah.
or like Dance with Wolves, or just
We
like
can go on. We can list so
it's
many.
the white person can do this better than the actual people.
Right, exactly.
So, which brings us to, like, I guess, like the main topic for this episode. Just our feelings on when when white authors write Asian protagonists or use like Asian settings as part of their plot in their books. I don't know. How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, obviously I don't want to say, I'm not someone who would say that that people can't write what they want to write, so to speak. But, and I do think that like white authors can write Asian characters, but I think it just, I think all we're asking for is that you research and you respect like what you're writing about.
Yeah.
Because, Asian people are people too. So I feel like, I've read like books. I mean, most of us have probably read books by white authors about non-white people, and they're probably pretty good. Like there are definitely good ones out there, but it's because they like treated the characters as people and not as like some exotic, thing to like flavor up their fantasy world or whatever. So I think that's the main thing, is that people just want to be respected and, for the author to have empathy for what the subject they're treating.
It sounds like this author, especially this book, dealt a lot with tropes and stereotypes, and I'm sure maybe it was because of the first book, so the nuance would come in like the second or third book it's trilogy, right?
I think so.
But at the same time, like when the baseline is already like we've said so many times tonight, problematic. Like it kind of I think these days we're asking for a little more legwork on the parts of our authors, right? To
Right.
like develop their characters a little, especially in literature when it's all about characters on the page and writing,
Yeah.
right?
I think like with me, like the main problem is when, sure, there are white authors who can write non-white stories and do it exceptionally well.
Right.
But the problem is there are like people of color who can write those same exact stories, but they don't get recognized. They don't get as much publicity. They don't get as much marketing or money to get their book out there. And that's why their books are kind of like passed over in like the judging panel for
Right.
awards. And that's really upsetting because it's just like, well,
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
like a white author writing a really like well done book on slavery, like how is that going to compete with like a black author who, you know, wrote a story on like slavery? And
right.
Yeah.
it's just like, well, like how do you handle that, you know? Like
Yeah.
So we're talking about questions of just the general like institutional privilege that white
Right.
authors have, right?
yeah, like it's a question of opportunity because yeah, like I think like Rira said, like there are white authors who can and do write like beautiful stories about people not like them, but the problem is that like, you know, people who have the lived experience don't get the same opportunities or recognition that the white author does. So maybe it's on the white author's part to maybe step back and make room for more.
Also, it's
own
like
voices,
the
as
question
it is.
of like their intent, right?
Right.
Are they just like the thing that I've been hearing a lot on like social media and like on articles is that diversity is now like considered a trend in
Right.
publishing, and I'm like, well, diversity isn't a trend. It's
It's our new reality.
It's real life.
It's
Yeah.
real life, and like authors who are like, oh, I need to like have diverse characters in my book so I could like sell more books. I think that's the wrong intent. Like,
Right.
why go through the effort of writing something that you don't really have any experience in doing
Right.
just so you can make
Just
more
to like,
money?
check
Like,
it off, right?
but then if you're a white person and you're like, I really want to write this book about like a gay black middle schooler in like an inner city because I want to bring attention to it because I know that I'm privileged and I know that like
People will listen
people
to me.
will listen to me, and maybe like non-black people will read this book because
Right.
there is the issue of like, well, like I think a lot of publishers, they say, oh, this is our black author, like,
Right.
like read him. And it's same thing with Asian authors, like this is our Asian author,
Yes.
like all the Asian people should read this book. And it's like, no, like there needs to be some like crossovers, you know, like
Right. Yeah.
otherwise people aren't going to learn new things. Like
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
people think that like because it's a black author writing about black subjects or an Asian author writing an Asian fantasy that like they're they're intimidated to read it because the white is seen as default. So
Yeah.
you like just
Right.
view it as a fantasy. You never go like, oh, Lord of the Rings is a white fantasy. You're just like, no, that's just fantasy.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking about like Asian sci-fi, like
Right.
What, what are your thoughts about the other way around then? You know, like Asian American authors writing stories that don't feature any Asian characters.
I have a very complicated, like I don't know. My feelings are so mixed.
Yeah, I mean, I bring this up only because this is typically the first argument that gets brought up.
Right.
about
Yeah.
this, like, how come it goes one way, not the other? You know, in terms of casting, there's a pretty well, I feel like there's a not a simple but a very logical explanation, which is, in terms of casting characters, you can cast white characters written as white with other races because white characters are typically blank slates. They can be anything.
Right.
Whereas characters that are written as Asian probably shouldn't be given to a white person because they're written as Asian. Like they're not blank slates.
Right.
Right. So in the literary world where you can, where an Asian American, where Yu, the author, might realistically write a story about a white fantasy world without any Asians, or even like medieval times or something.
See, like I'm like okay with it when, like, specifically when it's like not set in the real world. Because if it's fantasy, if it's their own world, and they're like, oh, like it just happens that my protagonist is not going to be Asian, like they're like, or they don't like, or they fail to mention it,
right?
Because it's just like, oh, Asia doesn't exist in my fantasy world, so why should I mention that this person is Asian,
right?
And like to that degree, like I think I'm like okay with it, but yeah, I do have mixed feelings when I read a book and it's contemporary and it's YA, and I'm like, I have a lot of issues about like with like YA books particularly, because it's for young authors, and that's when, like, at least for me, like books that I read as like a middle schooler, those stuck with me.
Right.
So it's like, oh, if it's like harmful, then I'm just like, oh, that's gonna like last a while in the kid's psyche.
Right, because that's like like a lot of my childhood favorites are still my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's like, obviously it's fine for Asian writers to write white people, and part of that is like the casting thing where we have so many white characters. It's kind of like they're seen as blank slates because we have so many examples of them, so there's like there's no like stereotype. You're not like, oh, white people are all like this, because we've seen like rich white people, poor white people, like, gay,
right,
straight, magical, whatever. But like with like non-white characters, a lot of times it's like we're always in the same roles. So it's that whole like privilege opportunity thing again.
Right.
Where it's kind of like, well, if you have a harmful stereotype of a non-white character, like it has more impact because that's already what the audience is used to and what, you've internalized as true. Whereas like, with a white character, like maybe you write a really bad like white character, but it's not going to make like society think that all white people are like that.
Right.
So I'm fine with like that, but I do like have mixed feelings about the whole like, if a Asian writer writes a book and there's no other races in it, but I also don't want to say like, oh, because you're like non-white, you have like that you have to carry the burden of like representing non-white people,
And I feel like at the same way, like non-white authors have, are more aware of the diversity issue too, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
I am just imagining the movie version of The Continent and how problematic that would be.
No.
Maybe that's what the publishers have thought. Will we ever be able to sell this as a movie?
Right, like maybe you should visualize it as a movie, because that's true.
The end goal of most YA. Like, I don't think not the end goal of most authors, but like for publishers, I mean, I'm sure that's part of it. Like, can we make this into a movie? Will this be the next Hunger Games?
Right.
Yeah. I think it's also like the fact that like when, at least with like white authors writing books about Asia or with Asian protagonists, they're not really going the Asian American route. They're like talking about Asia, like a totally different culture. And I'm just like, well, when Asian American authors write books with white protagonists, it's usually set in America,
right?
Like if it's contemporary, so it's like American culture.
Right.
It's not like they're trying to write a totally different thing. It's So I don't know. Like it gets a little bit hazy there, but yeah, definitely privilege and just representation plays a big part in it.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely a discussion that we'll probably have more and more in the future, especially as more Asian Americans and Asian authors become more prominent in mainstream literature, I guess. But from what I hear, the Continent is back in. It's no longer being released in January, right? It's being reworked.
Yeah, they're delaying the publication because of all the issues that were raised.
Well, hopefully they fix them. I guess I don't know how you can.
I
Yeah.
mean, if she really wants to get into the core of it and like restructure her world in that book, it's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
Like it's not, and I don't know if like the publisher is willing to like take that much time
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
rework
it's
it.
not like a simple like.
It's not
like,
an easy
search and
fix.
replace. You know?
Yeah.
Instead of like reddish brown people, let's make them purple. Just like it's still not okay.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to the author, and hopefully she learned her lesson, I guess, or learned something from this whole experience. And I think that'll do it for this this mid-month edition of Books and Boba, the podcast. For those of you following along, this month's book is Monstrous, a graphic novel by Marjorie Liu. And both Reaver and I have both finished it.
Alice has also finished it.
So we can't wait to talk to you all about it.
Yeah. And
Oh.
it's like an Asian inspired or Asian aesthetic fantasy.
Yeah.
So
Pretty
so
awesome.
many thoughts.
All right. So that's going to do it for us. We'll see you all in a few weeks. Keep reading. This episode of Books and Boba was hosted by Marvin Yue, Rira Yu, and Alice Van Chang, and produced and edited by Marvin Yue. For further discussion on the books covered at Books and Boba, please visit our Goodreads forum. You can find the link on our Facebook page at Books and Boba, as well as by searching for the group Books and Boba on Goodreads.com. Books and Boba is also a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a brand new collective of Asian American podcasts and podcasters. You can learn more about the collective as well as check out our founding slate of programs by visiting the website www.podcastpotluck.com.
Potluck.